We've been saying this for quite some time. The UK is a service-based economy. And, well, it's as simple as that. A service-based economy is something that is very, very much dominant for its trade for selling of services. So insurance, banking, um, marketing, business services, arts. Think of any sort of service you would go to someone to procure. That is the type of economy that we have had. And that has been very, very much built upon by, well, years of benign um, economy neglect. And there's this big thing about Brexit where a lot of people were convinced, even though you had people like Patrick Minford who were saying the quiet part out loud that, Brexit was going to completely wipe away British manufacturing, that there was going to be this revival of it. And it's not impossible to have a British revival of manufacturing. It's that it would take years, if not decades, to actually accomplish, and any government would actually have to have a serious economic plan for how they would go about achieving this. But one of the things that you have seen the most noise about, and, well, the musicians that are good at making that noise, and we've covered this quite a few times on this channel, is the problems that musicians are having in sort of plying their trade now in the EU. And we've heard it from a couple of very small to medium bands to even big bands that have basically said this: they could have never had the success that they have now if they could not tour in the EU. So it is limiting any band's potential growth or future from not being able to tour in the EU. And it's not just big players, like Elton John has been heavily involved in this campaign. It is smaller bands as well that have gone to the EU to do a concert and then been almost to a point where they could not go out and play because their equipment and instruments have not turned up because they got stuck in a queue at Calais. So make no mistake, this is going to have a very, very big cultural impact on the UK, and especially in the EU as well, because it's very likely there's going to be sort of less, music in the UK, in sort of less British music in the EU. And regardless of what your opinions may be, culturally, as an effect, where we do see a lot of cultural osmosis between sort of the UK and the EU, that will be very bad, not just for the EU, but very bad for our own musicians over here as well, because obviously the reverse will eventually apply, even though, as we said before, the border is currently open because of Jacob Rees-Mogg has yet again pushed back checks. So let's go into more of these consequences that this is currently having on the British music industry. But before we do get into that, please remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there is a link to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And of course, there is the YouTube subscription button as well, where you get badges, emojis, and then you get a free super chat per month that you can use in our live streams. And of course, there is the YouTube thank you button as well. So let's get over to this as well. This goes over today to The Independent with their story on this, with the title of Brexit Red Tape. Bookings of UK musicians at EU's biggest festivals crash by 45%. So we're almost at a point where half of UK musicians have been locked out of performing in the EU. Yeah, this is going to get very bad for music in the UK. So, bookings of UK musicians at the EU's biggest festivals have crashed by 45% in the starkest evidence yet of the damage from the Brexit trade deal. The agreement, which inflicted punishing costs of red tape by removing visa-free touring, is being blamed for the huge slump in appearances at events in Spain, Hungary, and Germany. At last week's Benign Sisium, I think that's how you say it, the alternative music festival near Valencia, just 14 UK artists played. down from an average of 24 between 2017 and 2019, the figures show. Likewise, next month's Zelgist Festival in Budapest, only 18 UK acts are booked to appear, compared with an average of 25 in the 3 years before Brexit. And only 4 British artists are now scheduled to play in Lollapalooza, an event festival in Berlin in September, down from 11 across the period between 2017 and 2019. Best for Britain, the internationalist campaign group, which researched the statistics, said that this was the evidence of a dud Brexit deal, now that festivals are recovering from the COVID pandemic. The Beatles famously made their name in Europe, and it's on tour that many musicians gain the formative experiences and audiences that they need to take off, Naomi Smith, the chief executive, said. Our government has not only just robbed emerging British talent of these opportunities ahead, but it has also made international acts think twice before including Glasgow or London in their European tours. Deborah Anitas, the head of the Interspace Society of, the Incorporated Society of Musicians, said the figures underline how the festival organisers for British bands are, and the bottom of your list due to new barriers created. She added, whoever ends up replacing Boris Johnson must commit to removing these needless bureaucracy, which is stifling the prosperity and creativity of the next generation of British musicians. The loss of big bookings for the major festivals will now fuel ongoing fears about the plight of musicians, losing their chance to further their careers after the Brexit deal broke a promise to save visa-free touring. The Independent revealed how the UK rejected the EU offer of the mobility agreement, leaving artists mired now in red tape, and no effort has been made to begin fresh talks with Brussels. Instead, ministers have, quote, made misleading claims about the costs and paperwork involved, despite Mr. Johnson's public vow to fix the crisis made more than a year ago. And it was revealed that a production of The Phantom of the Opera was brought in from China to tour the EU because the Brexit red tape had made it too expensive to use the British one. Just imagine that. Think about how insane that is, that you are having to bring an entire production from China because it is too expensive to get the production from London. Just think about how crazy that actually is. Elton John has led the criticism of the betrayal of the musicians, while the rock band White Lies has attacked the appalling Brexit customs rules, which saw them forced to cancel a performance in Paris after their equipment was seized. David Frost, who negotiated the agreement, admitted that it had been a mistake not to compromise with the EU and called for a rethink, but ministers have failed to budge. So, yeah, that's the unfortunate reality now for musicians, and they get it 100% right. The Beatles would have never have been the band they are today if they had not toured in Europe. It's just straight up facts. And of course, back then, the Beatles were under a lot of, music stuff to be able to do those tours that they had in Europe with all with the paperwork and stuff that they had to do. But that's because they had certainly a lot of backing, and of course they were allowed to sort of grow that talent. And now it very much does look like that ability to be able to sort of grow your audience, to grow your talent, to have those opportunities of those different audiences has now been thrown into nothingness. And the very much fact that this was a UK decision to not allow this in the first place by David Frost, who then has come back and said, well, this is an actual mistake. Maybe we should reconsider this. And of course, at the moment, the government is not acquiescing to this, to say, let's sit down, negotiate this. No, they're not even attempting to do that, because, as we've said before, they perceive any negotiations, any talk with the EU to be a sign of weakness. And if Liz Truss even dared or even Boris dared to negotiate with the EU on this fact, the ERG would have pounced upon them and saying, you are being weak on Brexit. This is not how a, quote, Brexiteer prime minister should act. And that is, once again, the situation we are in, where the ERG is dictating the negotiating terms, even though they are a minority group in the Conservative Party, which is now gained almost complete control of the Conservative Party. And they probably will again when Liz Truss comes in, and she is definitely going to appoint more hardcore ERGers, and not just them, but it's going to bring in more people from these right-wing libertarian think tank groups into the halls of number 10. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there is a link to my Patreon page and an organization link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.